Welcome to the Balanced Hormones Empowered Women podcast. I'm your host, Abby Vallejo, certified personal trainer, registered dietitian, and certified health coach. I teach women of all ages how to align their diet, their lifestyle, and their exercise with their hormones in order to unlock their most vibrant health. And this is a feminine based approach of working smarter and not harder. So today, I wanted to talk to you guys about body image, struggles with body image, and I wanted to share a story about a time in my life when I actually struggled with this so much that I pretty much stopped eating. So, I imagine that a lot of women out there have a similar type of struggle either in their own past or, one of their friends or family members or, other women that you know. So I just kind of wanted to share my story in the hopes that you feel less alone in some of your struggles because I know we tend to think, oh, with social media, everyone else has just really got it all together and, everyone else is so happy and doing so great and looks so good. And we're basically seeing the highlight reel on their Instagram or on their Facebook or on their social media, right? We're usually seeing the best moments, the best outfits, the most put together looks, right? Which is great. Those things are fun and wonderful to share. But I think what also happens is we tend to be harder on ourselves and more critical of ourselves because we just kind of tend to think, at least I know I do. I'm like, wow, everyone else has got it so together. And then there's me. Does that happen to you too? So I just kind of wanted to share my story. So this goes back to actually when I was in college. So when I went to college the first time, so if you've listened to my story before, the first episode, I shared that I actually first went for international relations before I got into health and dietetics and all of the natural stuff. So when I first went to college, I actually spent, as I talked about in the episode, I actually spent my first year in Spain. So I was over in Madrid. Now, I had only ever lived in the Americas before, in the United States. I'd lived in Brazil, I traveled to Mexico. So those were the cultures that were familiar to me, right? American culture, Latin American culture. And the body image there. And I had just kind of coming off of having lived in Brazil during my adolescence, where a fuller figure is very highly prized, let's say. Brazil's known for its levels of plastic surgery as well, but also just having, really beautiful people and people that really value beauty and femininity. And, you'll often see women just being very feminine. At least it was this way when I lived there, like high heels all the time, nails always done, just this big cultural emphasis on beauty. And so me being an adolescent and living there, right, this really kind of got ingrained in my mind. It's probably why I still wear earrings even to the gym, because that's like a holdover from my days in Brazil, even though I'm a lot more relaxed, I think, than I used to be, and probably more than Brazilian culture in that regard about beauty. But anyway, I like a little more wildness. But anyway, so I had just spent, that time living in Brazil, really absorbing the culture, and this stuff was really ingrained in me. And also I got a little bit of a fuller figure when I lived there. I did a lot of eating. Brazil has really good food. Maybe I wasn't so active at the time. I was a teenager. I wasn't really consistent and solid with my gym routine yet. So, I got a little chunky, the chunkiest I've ever been, actually. And so I had, just come off of being immersed in the Brazilian culture. And then right after, I went to Spain. So I kind of almost basically within a few months of coming home from Brazil was already in Madrid, Spain as a freshman in college going to a school in Madrid. And it was such a culture shock for me. I you'd think like, oh, maybe in Brazil and Spain, one's Latin American, one's Mediterranean. Not that they don't have anything in common, but you'd think they kind of have more in common. To me, it felt like a world of difference. Just the culture felt so different. The people were so different. Obviously, the language, even though it has similarities and is sort of mutually intelligible, felt so different. Europe was just a whole different thing, right? And so I'm living there and I'm doing a ton of walking, which was great. I had an apartment, I had a host family, and then I remember I would either have quite a long walk to the train station where I would take the metro to my university, or I would, if I made it on time, I would catch a bus that would take me to the train station, and then and then and then there was a walk from the station to the university. And it was just, and obviously I'm in Europe. I don't have a car. I don't know anyone that has a car. And Spain, and especially Madrid, is extremely walkable. It's very pedestrian friendly. They have good transportation. So, I mean, it was wonderful in that aspect, and it really got me walking a lot. So, I'm eating less because, I'm in Spain, and I'm walking more. So, I kind of just started to lose weight. And I also noticed that Europeans are a lot thinner. And this is probably why, because they do so much walking, they're so active. And just, I don't know, just the shape of women tends to be thinner, taller and thinner. Spain, you could argue if they're not maybe necessarily all taller, but taller, and women tend to be taller and thinner in Europe, certainly, than they tend to be in Latin America. So I kind of went from like one body image being like, this is the ideal woman, to completely different. And I remember going to shop in stores, and I, being really excited to, shop in Spain, and discovering, Spanish style stores, and having trouble fitting into the pants. I could not fit. Now, this was back in 2006, so maybe this has changed since then, but 2006, we were very much in the era of like Kate Moss is the perfect body, right? And everyone was like getting into the thin, thin, thin. I could not fit in any pants. And I remember being so disappointed with myself because I loved shopping. I was so in my girly girl phase. When I lived in Brazil, I was, oh my God, I was shopping all the time. I had all these clothes. I wore a bunch of colors. Like I would wear dresses and skirts and high heels and, pants sometimes too. And when I got to Spain, the style was really different, which, was cool. But I remember just feeling really kind of sad because I couldn't fit in any of the pants. And I was like, well, I'm not European. I don't know. My legs are too thick. I just don't fit in this, in this body type image that they, that's obviously ideal here because all the clothes are being made to fit, this particular figure. And so I remember having to find there, I remember in Madrid, there was a neighborhood called Cuatro Caminos, and lots of Latin American people live there. And a lot of them have stores. So I would actually go there and I would shop for pants in that neighborhood because they would fit me better than they would in, the Spanish department stores. And so while I was there in Spain, I met my first boyfriend. He was from Italy, from Milan, and we got together. And so we were together the whole time we were in Spain. And basically, where I'm going with the story is what happened when I went to Italy. So Spain is kind of a lead-in. It was like my introduction to Europe, my introduction to that body style, to that lifestyle. There was a lot of things I loved about it. But, being an impressionable, I was 17 years old when I arrived in Spain. I was still young and impressionable, and kind of threw me for a loop with the change in what the ideal body image was from Brazil and Latin America to Spain and Europe. So anyway, get with this Italian guy. We're together. We do spend some time in the United States. We did transfer after a year from being in Madrid. We transferred to Miami. Lived in Miami, so I was like a little more in my zone there, being back in the U.S., being more in a, Latin kind of Caribbean culture, but still being heavily influenced by the Italian culture and European culture, obviously, being a young, impressionable girl, really wanting to learn Italian and like soak up all about the Italian culture because, my Italian boyfriend at the time. And so I really did. I learned Italian. I took Italian classes. I just really immersed myself, even though we were living in Miami. I was all about it. And so on holidays, we would go to Milan, which is where he was from. And when I say Italian, I mean born and raised in Italy. Okay. I don't mean guys like, Italian American or anything like that. No, born and raised in Italy, had always lived in Italy, happened to speak English because he had learned it, but 100% from Milan, and his family was all from there too. So holidays, summers, we would go and spend in Italy, and I loved it. I mean, who doesn't love Italy, right? Milan is it's so beautiful, and it's so fashion. I just remember just walking around, and I mean, the people are just so elegant, and Spain is cool, but Italy's even, I mean, there's a reason that Milan is like one of the top fashion cities in the whole world, right? I mean, people just look the part, and his family lived downtown, close to all the fashionable areas. So it was like right there. So I remember just walking around, and, it was by the Duomo and the gallerias and, all the fancy places and all the shopping. And I mean, I was just like, wow, this is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. The people are some of the most elegant people I've ever seen. And I was just really loving being immersed in the culture. But there again, body image, right? So kind of very similar to Spain, like, and that time of the world of, in 2006, thin was in, right? Like I was saying, the kind of the Kate Moss body type was the thing that was in. So me being a tall girl who's kind of, I was pretty young at the time. Like I said, by the time I was in Italy, early 20s by then, right? Being into fashion and, I'm tall. I'm like 5'9.5", 5'10", walking around. What happens in Milan, places like Milan, there's scouts for modeling agencies. There are scouts that are out and about in all the, big public areas. They're in the big malls, they're in the gallerias, they're downtown. They're constantly scouting because Milan is a fashion city. So they're always looking for models. They're always looking for fresh faces. And of course, they're looking for young, tall girls. That's what, what their most of their ideal clientele is. So, as I'm just going about my normal day with my Italian boyfriend and his family, just adjusting to life in Italy, I'm constantly getting scouted. And this was a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, I started to feel maybe beautiful, like, oh my gosh, they're scouting me. I feel kind of validated, like I keep getting scouted. But it actually ended up being a curse, because it developed into a pattern. And this is what would happen. And this is what happened so many times. Let me guys tell you the story. So I'd be out and about, minding my business. I would get scouted. The scout would approach me. They'd give me a, business card. There'd be, come to a casting call at, set date and time at this modeling agency. And they were legit agencies too. So I'd go, and then, you have to like put on a bikini, or, they have to look at you in your underwear. They have to take your measurements. I mean, really, like, you get judged. They look at your skin, they look at your hair, they look at your nails. Basically, like, you have to go under the microscope, and then they tell you if you're basically worthy or not, right? And that's how my young brain interpreted it. So I would go in, I'd go through this process, and they'd be like, oh, we still want you to lose a little bit of weight. We think that your hips are too wide. Now, if you've seen my hips, this is ridiculous. I am not Jennifer Lopez. She has a beautiful figure. I do not have that hourglass shape, okay? And so they'd say, you're too thick, your hips are too wide. We need you to lose a little more weight. Your body's kind of too athletic. We want a less athletic look. So me, being in my early 20s, was like, okay, clearly I'm the problem. I need to change myself. I need to change my body to fit this mold of what they want, what they deem acceptable. So what I started doing, I'd go to the gym all the time, but I wouldn't lift weights. I would do cardio. Oh my God, I killed myself on those cardio machines. I was doing cardio all the time. I basically stopped eating, which is so sad considering I was living in Italy and the food is so good and so amazing and good for you, but I just had my priorities all wrong. So I remember there was this like pumpkin soup that would come in this little box that I would always buy, and I would eat that, and I basically stopped eating anything else but that. When I was really hungry, I would just have like this pumpkin soup. And I just started doing that regularly, overworking, like working out too much, and also doing, just doing lots of the normal walking, and then not eating, and basically starving myself and I just kept telling myself, but I need to find a source of income here. Like if I'm going to live in Italy, I need to find something that I can do. I need to find a niche. I need to find a place where I can belong, right? Because that's ultimately what we want. And I thought, if I can get in with this crowd, then I can feel a sense of belonging, a sense of worthiness, and then I can work, I can make money. It was just like what my dream was at the time. And I was so serious about it that as the months went by, I stopped getting my period, stopped menstruating. I was just like exhausted all the time. I didn't have energy. I was like in a bad mood. I was snappy most of the time because I was so hungry. I was desperate, because I'm like, I'm trying so hard. I'm literally killing myself here. I'm unhappy. I'm alone. And I did it to myself, right? And I don't even blame my boyfriend at the time. He Did he sit by and let it happen? Yeah, he did. But I was also so insistent about, wanting the modeling dream. And so, you know, he supported me in that. And it finally got to a point. I remember going to yet another, and I lost track of how many casting calls I went to and how many agencies I visited, but let me tell you, it was a lot. It would happen again and again. And every time I would go, and they would say, just a little bit more, just a few centimeters more, just lose a little bit more and then come back. And that's what they would always tell me, come back, do this and come back. And so I would. And it was just a little bit more, just a little bit more. So finally I went to this one and I was really hopeful because by this time I didn't have a period. I was super thin. I was the thinnest I had ever been. I was like, I didn't think I could eat any less, work out anymore, do any more. Like I was just, you should have seen me. I was real thin. And I go in and I strip down to my underwear and they look at me. And I remember this guy, the casting director, or, whatever his title was, looking at me and saying, you know what? For a woman, you're good, but not for a model. Like you'll never be a model like this because your hips are just too wide and you're too thick and you look too athletic. And we are looking for someone who is asciutta is the word that he used, which is basically dry, but it's kind of like shredded, but not obviously not in a shredded, like in a muscle sense, but just like a lean, like just so lean that there's nothing extra on them. And I looked at him and I was like, well, then you can have my corpse and maybe you'll want to model that because I'm killing myself and I can't do this anymore. And that was just the moment for me where I had just had enough. And I remember walking out of there and my dreams that I had had for years by then of modeling and getting into that industry and being in the right place, right? I'm in Milan, I'm in the place, I'm, all the things are set up for me to succeed here. And those dreams just got washed down the drain in that moment because I realized, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness that I realized this. I realized that I was literally killing myself and that I was so unhappy and my hormones were so out of balance. I wasn't even getting a cycle. I was just depleting and depriving and basically hating myself. And it still wasn't good enough. And it never was going to be. It was never going to be enough. They were never going to choose me. And that it killed me, but it also freed me because I finally had to accept in that moment that there was not more that I could do to punish myself into being what they wanted me to be. And so I walked out of there and bless my heart, the first thing I did is I stopped in a grocery store and I bought every single thing that tickled my fancy that I had been depriving myself of for months. And it was, I guess, the Italian junk food, right? Which is a little better than American junk food, but it was just like these little muffin things and these little pastries. And I mean, I bought a whole bag full. And I walked out of the supermarket. And let me tell you something. In Italy, people do not eat on the streets or in their cars unless they're like at a specific like dining, if there's like dining tables out on the street, you'll often see that, like cafes and stuff. Or you can walk around eating gelato, right? Their ice cream. But people do not eat and do other activities. In Italy, they're very much like eating is an activity in and of itself. And I love that about Italian culture. So you do not see people driving and eating. You don't see people walking around and like shoving down a sandwich or something. Like you just don't see that. Like Italians are very, very like eating is a specific activity. We sit, we eat with family, we take our time. It's a beautiful thing, right? So I'm like walking out of the supermarket. I have the supermarket bag. I reach in, I open the first package of whatever it is, muffins or cookies or whatever it was, and I start shoving them down my throat. And I'm walking down the street and I am stuffing my face. And people are staring because you don't do that in Milan, Italy. Nobody does that. And I had just lost it, you guys, at this point. I had no more self-control and my survival instinct kicked in. And I stuffed my face with everything in that bag all the way home. And it was kind of a long walk home. And I remember just thinking like, okay, that's it. Like point of no return. And when I say my survival instinct kicked in, you guys, I don't know if you've ever experienced this before. When your survival instinct kicks in and your body is literally starving and you get your hands on some food, you turn into a shark in a feeding frenzy. You literally cannot stop yourself. And it wasn't just in that moment. I went home and I started eating, and I did not stop eating for like 2 weeks, even though I wanted to, even though I didn't want to put back on all that weight that I had lost. I could not stop myself. I was eating everything in sight. I remember I had a package of these. Oh my gosh, they were so good. They had like a Scottish looking wrapper on them, and they were like these butter biscuit cookies. And oh my goodness, it was like a plaid, like a Scottish plaid butter biscuits. And I remember like sitting down and eating the whole entire package in one go, literally dipping them in milk and eating this whole thing. And I could not stop myself. And within like 2 to 3 weeks, I had put back on all the weight that I had lost. But you know what? I was so much better for it. I was so much better for it. And at that point, I decided, okay, you know what? This relationship isn't working out. Italy isn't working out. Not that I don't love the country. I totally do. But it was like me at that point in my life, in that situation, in that relationship, I just outgrew it. I just outgrew it. Basically, all in that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm lonely here. I'm unhappy. I'm, I had developed really unhealthy like body image issues and like disordered eating. I never considered myself as having an eating disorder, but it was very disordered eating, right? It was very detrimental to my health. And a part of me knew like, okay, I just can't be in this environment anymore. Like, I don't want to get scouted again. I want to leave. So I actually ended things with him. I basically ended my relationship with Italy. My love affair with Italy, right? And with modeling just ended. And, I put the weight back on, my cycle came back, and then I started getting more interested in health. And even though, you think, oh gosh, well, you were living in Milan, you had a loving, Italian boyfriend. You could have had like a whole fancy, glamorous life there, right? But I would have hated myself. I think that's where I really had to get honest with myself. Like, these were all the things that I thought I wanted, and it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because so it really helped me start to define what actually mattered to me, not just what looked good on the surface or sounded good on the surface, but what actually mattered and what actually would nourish me and make me happy. And that started a journey of me learning about health, me getting more interested in going to the gym and lifting weights and becoming strong, me getting more interested in food and what food does in your body and how you nourish yourself properly. And let me tell you now that I'm really glad that I went through that, but I'm also so glad that I experienced that deception and that disappointment so that I could accept that that was not the right path for me. And for some women it is. Some women are just naturally that thin, naturally have that body type, right? I know the modeling industry has changed a lot to include more, women's body types, more fuller figures and things like that, which that is good. But in that time it was just not the right fit for me, and I'm just forever grateful that I decided to choose myself. So that is my message for you today. Choose yourself. You don't need to look like a magazine or a person on social media or what a certain industry thinks you need to look like. And maybe it's not the modeling industry, maybe it's the plastic surgery industry, right? Or the makeup industry, or, pick your poison. You don't need to look like any of those people. You just need to be happy and look like you. And that is more than enough. And you are beautiful exactly as you are. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you like this episode, be sure to like and share with other women in your life that could benefit from hearing this. Until next time.